Picture this. A message appears on a wall. Sabinus here writes, Hermeros, you're so fake. You act like you're rich, but everyone knows you're just a chicken vendor trying to seem important. No, this isn't a tweet from last week. This graffiti was carved into a wall in Pompeii nearly 2,000 years ago. An ancient Roman throwing shade about someone's social status, preserved in stone for 2 millennia. In fact, archaeologists have discovered over 1,500 pieces of electoral graffiti in Pompeii alone, many of them dripping with status anxiety. People campaigning for political positions, making endorsements, and yes, throwing plenty of ancient Roman shade at their social rivals. 40% of these messages were strategically placed on prestigious houses, despite there being 3 times as many shops and bars available as writing spaces. Even then, everyone wanted to be associated with the influential and wealthy. The more we study these ancient messages, the more they sound like modern social media posts. People bragging about their connections, stressing about their social position, and obsessing over how others perceived them. The Romans didn't have Instagram followers or LinkedIn connections, but they clearly spent just as much time worrying about their social status as we do today. Which raises a fascinating question. Why? Why do humans, across every time period and every civilization, seem hardwired to obsess over our social standing? From Pompeian graffiti artists to TikTok influencers, from ancient Egyptian tomb builders to modern LinkedIn power networkers. What drives this seemingly universal human preoccupation with status? What if this isn't just about vanity or materialism? What if our obsession with social status runs much deeper, perhaps even into the very architecture of our brains? Today, we're going to explore why humans can't seem to stop keeping score of their social position, and what 2,000 years of status anxiety can teach us about our modern digital dilemmas. Let's talk about flexing ancient civilization style. Before there were Rolex watches and Tesla cars, humans found equally dramatic ways to show off their social status. And the numbers are staggering. Take ancient Egypt. When Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid of Giza, he wasn't just planning for the afterlife. He was making the ultimate status statement. With a volume of 635,733 cubic meters, it was the largest monument on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. Now compare that to the tomb of a high-ranking official, which might reach 81,600 cubic meters, or a common citizen's burial shaft at a mere 0.82 cubic meters. That's not just a difference in scale, it's a mathematically precise hierarchy carved into the landscape itself. The Egyptians were so obsessed with status that they even standardized it. They developed the deben, a unit of value that started at 29 grams in the early dynastic period and evolved to 90 to 95 grams by the New Kingdom. Everything from copper to gold was measured this way, creating a precise system for determining exactly how much more important one person was than another. The Romans took status anxiety to new heights, or perhaps new depths. In Pompeii alone, archaeologists have found thousands of pieces of graffiti and electoral propaganda, many strategically placed on prestigious homes to associate candidates with wealth and power. But perhaps no one perfected the art of status symbolism quite like medieval Europe. They created an entire visual language of status through heraldry, complex coats of arms that became increasingly elaborate over time. By the 1300s, these weren't just simple lion emblems anymore. They were intricate mathematical compositions combining multiple symbols, each precisely regulated by law. King Eric of Pomerania's coat of arms combined 5 different heraldic symbols, quartered by a cross, a medieval equivalent of having verified badges on every social media platform. What's fascinating is how these ancient status symbols drove innovation. The Great Pyramid required revolutionary advances in mathematics and engineering. Roman political campaigns pioneered marketing techniques we still use today. Medieval heraldry developed into a sophisticated system of visual communication that influenced modern graphic design. In other words, our ancestors' status anxiety literally helped build civilization. Those massive monuments, intricate art pieces, and complex social hierarchies weren't just showing off, they were driving progress. The human need to say, "I'm important," has been reshaping our world for millennia. But here's what's really interesting. The size of these status symbols often corresponded directly to social inequality. In ancient Egypt, the more unequal the society became, the bigger the pyramids grew. The more stratified medieval society became, the more complex their heraldic symbols got. It's almost as if the intensity of status anxiety was a direct reflection of social divides, a pattern that might tell us something important about our own time. Imagine you're living in 1850. Your great-grandfather was a farmer. Your grandfather was a farmer. Your father was a farmer. And you just invented a new type of steam engine and became one of the wealthiest people in your city. The Industrial Revolution didn't just transform how we made things, it completely shattered the ancient rules of social status. For thousands of years, status had been relatively simple. You were born into it. The Pharaoh's son became Pharaoh. The Lord's son became Lord. The blacksmith's son became a blacksmith. But the Industrial Revolution threw that entire system into chaos. Suddenly, someone could go from rags to riches in a single generation. The old aristocracy found themselves being outspent by self-made industrialists who had no idea which fork to use at dinner. This created an entirely new kind of status anxiety. When status was inherited, you simply had to maintain what you were born into. But now you had to earn it. And more importantly, you had to prove you'd earned it. Enter what economist Thorstein Veblen called conspicuous consumption, the practice of buying things specifically to show off your social status. The middle class exploded in size, and with it came an entirely new economy built around status symbols. Think of it as an arms race of showing off. The old aristocracy had their country manners and hunting parties. The new industrial rich responded with urban mansions and grand tours of Europe. The middle class, not to be left behind, developed their own status symbols: piano lessons for the children, fine china for entertaining, calling cards left at all the right houses. This was the birth of modern consumer culture. For the first time in history, a huge portion of the population had disposable income to spend on status symbols. And spend they did. Department stores arose as temples of conspicuous consumption. Mail-order catalogs brought status symbols to rural areas. Advertising emerged as an industry dedicated to creating and promoting new status markers. But here's what makes this period so fascinating. It wasn't just about showing off wealth anymore. The Industrial Revolution created new forms of status based on education, profession, and cultural capital. A university degree became a status symbol. The ability to appreciate fine art or classical music became a status symbol. Even knowing which books to discuss at dinner parties, became a way to signal your social position. This was also when we first see companies beginning to manufacture status itself. Take the diamond engagement ring, a tradition invented by De Beers in the 1930s through clever marketing. They transformed a simple piece of carbon into the ultimate symbol of romance and social status, proving that status symbols could now be created through advertising and social pressure. In other words, the Industrial Revolution didn't just create new ways to gain status, it industrialized status anxiety itself. It turned social position from something you inherited into something you had to constantly maintain and display. What the Industrial Revolution really gave us wasn't just steam engines and factories. It was a new kind of social mobility that came packaged with a new kind of perpetual status anxiety. For the first time in history, almost anyone could climb the social ladder. But that also meant almost anyone could fall down it. If the Industrial Revolution created modern status anxiety, the digital revolution has turned it into an exact science. We've moved from counting carriages in your neighbor's driveway to counting likes on your latest post. Think about this. In 2010, social media engagement rates hovered around 0.1 to 0.2% for Facebook posts. Fast forward to 2025, and we're seeing engagement rates of 2.65% on platforms like TikTok. That might not sound like much, but it represents a massive intensification in how we process and measure social status. We've created a world where every interaction, every social connection, and every moment of approval can be precisely quantified. Your great-grandparents competed for status within their village. Your grandparents competed within their city. Your parents competed within their professional network. But you're competing with the entire world. The average social media user now spends 2 hours and 20 minutes per day managing their online presence. That's 10 hours and 40 minutes per week spent in what amounts to a global status marketplace. Collectively, humans spend nearly 12 billion hours per day on social media. That's equivalent to 1.38 million years of human existence spent every single day on digital status management. This has created what I call the infinite status paradox. We have more ways than ever to connect, share, and gain recognition. But instead of feeling more secure in our social position, we're experiencing unprecedented levels of status anxiety. Studies show that Gen Z, the first truly digital native generation, reports significantly higher levels of anxiety and stress compared to previous generations, with over 60% experiencing social anxiety. We've also seen the emergence of entirely new forms of digital status symbols. Consider NFTs and virtual real estate, completely intangible assets that people invest in purely for status. The global NFT marketplace moves billions of dollars, not because these digital assets have practical value, but because they serve as status markers in our increasingly digital world. Like ancient Romans, who behaved differently in the forum versus the private villa, we now carefully curate different versions of ourselves across different platforms. LinkedIn for professional status, Instagram for lifestyle status, Twitter for intellectual status, TikTok for cultural status. Your social status is no longer something you discover at occasional social gatherings. It's something you can check every minute of every day through likes, shares, and follower counts. We've created a system of constant status feedback that would have been unimaginable to previous generations. The result? A world where status anxiety has become both more intense and more precise. We can now quantify exactly how much less popular we are than our peers, track our social influence in real time, and receive instant feedback on every attempt to improve our social position. But something fascinating is happening. The very technology that intensified our status anxiety might also be the key to liberating us from it. We're witnessing a profound shift in how different generations understand and value status, and it's reshaping our entire social landscape. Let's look at the numbers. According to recent studies, 67% of consumers now consider sustainability an important factor in purchasing decisions. 63% view a brand's environmental responsibility as crucial. Think about that for a moment. We're moving from a world where status came from showing off consumption to one where status comes from showing restraint. This shift is particularly pronounced among younger generations. 64% of millennials and Gen Z report that sustainability influences their purchasing decisions. They're not just buying different things, they're fundamentally redefining what status means. A Tesla isn't just a luxury car anymore. It's a statement about environmental consciousness. A secondhand designer bag isn't a compromise. It's a badge of sustainable consumption. But the transformation goes deeper than just green consumerism. We're seeing the emergence of what I call authenticity status, where being genuine and transparent actually carries more social capital than presenting a perfect facade. This is a radical departure from historical status symbols, which were all about masking reality behind a polished exterior. The data on personal branding tells a fascinating story. While some professionals invest up to $72,000 in comprehensive personal branding services, we're simultaneously seeing a trend toward what's called casual authenticity, where appearing too polished can actually damage your credibility. It's a paradox. Investing in appearing authentic while making sure that authenticity doesn't look too manufactured. This shift is also visible in how different generations manage their online presence. Studies show that Gen Z, despite being digital natives, are more likely to take digital detoxes than older generations. They're not abandoning digital platforms entirely, but they're developing a more nuanced relationship with them. Research indicates that participants who abstain from social media for just 14 days experience significant decreases in anxiety symptoms. Looking ahead to 2030 and beyond, we're likely to see even more radical transformations in how we think about status. Virtual and augmented reality will create new forms of status symbols we can barely imagine today. But more importantly, they might help us transcend traditional status hierarchies altogether by allowing us to move fluidly between different social contexts and identities. So, how do we manage status anxiety in this rapidly evolving landscape? The research suggests 3 key strategies. First, diversify your status sources. Just as you wouldn't put all your financial investments in one stock, don't tie your sense of worth to a single status hierarchy. Some days, your professional status might be down, but your social impact status is up. Second, practice status mindfulness. Research shows that people who take regular breaks from status tracking metrics report significantly lower anxiety levels. It's not about abandoning these platforms entirely, but about using them more intentionally. Third, and perhaps most importantly, recognize that status anxiety itself is universal. Those ancient Romans writing graffiti in Pompeii felt it. The Victorians, with their calling cards, felt it. Even the people whose social media posts make you feel inadequate, they feel it too. The future of status isn't about eliminating status anxiety. It's about transforming our relationship with it. As we move toward more authentic, sustainable, and diverse forms of status, we might finally be able to see status anxiety for what it really is. Not a personal failing, but a shared human experience that connects us across time and culture. From graffiti on Pompeian walls to pixels on smartphone screens, humans have always found ways to measure, display, and obsess over their social standing. What's changed isn't the fundamental human need for status, it's the increasingly sophisticated tools we've developed to pursue it. The ancient Romans would have instantly understood our obsession with likes and followers. They too lived in a world where social currency could be counted and displayed. The Industrial Revolution's nouveau riche would recognize our digital status symbols. They too navigated a world where traditional markers of status were being disrupted by new technologies and social possibilities. But perhaps we're finally reaching a point where we can see status anxiety for what it really is. Not an individual weakness, but a deeply rooted aspect of human society that transforms with each technological and social revolution. Understanding this history doesn't eliminate status anxiety, but it helps us place our own experiences in a broader context. How do ancient Roman status symbols compare to modern social media metrics? Think about the similarities between electoral graffiti in Pompeii and today's social media engagement rates. What role did the Industrial Revolution play in transforming how we think about social status? Consider how the shift from inherited to earned status mirrors today's digital meritocracy. How might future technologies change our relationship with status anxiety? What new forms of status display and measurement might emerge in virtual and augmented reality? Can you identify 3 major shifts in how humans have displayed social status throughout history? Consider how each technological revolution has created new ways to measure and display social standing.